guys, King Lagerfeld here, back with another video reaction. And today we're going to be doing a video by They Will Kill You. That's the name of the channel, because it's true, they will kill you, whoever they are. But it's called When Keeping Exotic Pets Goes Wrong. I mean, if you have an exotic pet like a tiger or a lion or a jaguar or an alligator, it has no choice but to go wrong. I mean, how could it go right? That'll never go wrong. I mean, that'll never go right. Because they're meant to be in the wild. You're not meant to keep them in your house. So I don't understand how you thought that could go right. But yeah, there seems to be like a countdown. I guess it's like 10 people who chose to have animals. Let's go ahead and get into the video and see how it went wrong. Let's go ahead and get into it and see.
Number 10. Unnamed Czech filmmaker.
They don't have a name?
In 2014, the member of a film crew was attacked by a pet lion in the Czech Republic while shooting a documentary at the owner's home. 53-year-old SS Basista was living with two adult lions, Alex and Mijanka, which he'd raised since they were cubs. Basista received constant complaints from his neighbors who described the felines as killers. Nevertheless, he and his family maintained they weren't aggressive. Alex and Majinka were allowed to roam freely around the house, and Basista would often join them in their rough and tumble antics. As the production crew arrived at their home in Stupava, Majinka was wandering around the living room. Suddenly, she pounced on the back of a filmmaker and sank her claws into his flesh. The owners were on standby and, after a brief struggle, managed to wrestle her away. The filmmaker sustained minor flesh wounds. Even though it would have taken mere seconds for Mijanka to inflict critical injuries, Basista insisted that she was only playing. Number 9. Austin Hatfield. Florida teenager Austin Hatfield found a cottonmouth near his Wimorma home in 2014 and decided that it would be his new pet. Even though the snake possessed a deadly venomous bite, 18-year-old Hatfield kept it in a pillowcase in his room. According to his best friend, Jason Belcher, the teenager would kiss the snake on its head and mouth, completely disregarding the dangers.
Even if it wasn't poisonous, why would you do that?
Cottonmouths are known to be somewhat skittish in nature, but will readily defend themselves if they feel threatened. On a Saturday night, the snake slithered out of the pillowcase, across Hatfield's stomach and off the bed. As the teen tried to recapture it, he was bitten. Belcher was in the kitchen when Hatfield walked in and asked to be taken to the hospital immediately. He was in critical condition on arrival, but was treated with anti-venom and eventually stabilized.
So he survived
too? It was reportedly illegal for Hatfield to have the cottonmouth at his home, since keeping venomous snakes require special permits. Number 8. Vladimir. In 2015, a 21-year-old Russian man identified by his first name as Vladimir was killed by the king cobra he'd kept as a pet.
Now someone's been killed by a snake.
At the man's apartment in the city of Tolyatti. It was there that, aside from the cobra, Vladimir also kept a green mamba and a red spitting cobra. His social media featured numerous pictures of him and his venomous pets.
You're
his
just asking for it
Anna
at this point.
Claimed that he'd like to play with the snakes and wasn't afraid of them. She was in the apartment.
You should have been,
Vladimir was bitten by the cobra. The animal had reportedly attacked him as he was trying to feed it. Anna immediately called an ambulance, but there was nothing more that the paramedics could do for him when they arrived at the residence. Within minutes of the bite, Vladimir had passed away in Anna's arms. Number 7. Mikhail Prasek.
So stupid. You could have prevented your own death.
33-year-old Mikhail Prasek kept two lions, a male and a female, in the back of his home in the village of Zdekov, Czech Republic. He didn't have a license for the animals, which he'd been breeding illegally and housing in cages of his own design. In spite of multiple fines and concerns expressed by local residents, Prasek refused to relocate his exotic pets or to allow anyone representing local authorities onto his property. They were at an impasse because there was no evidence of animal cruelty, and keeping the lions wasn't outright illegal due to a lack of alternative facilities in the country. Prasek made headlines in 2018 when he was out walking his lioness on a leash and a cyclist crashed into it. The cyclist suffered some scratches that required treatment, and local authorities at the time deemed it a traffic accident. In 2019, Prasek's father found him in the pen of his 9-year-old male lion. He had been fatally mauled and the pen was reportedly locked from the inside. Police were called to the scene and shot
like,
both lions, an action they deemed had been absolutely
oh my
necessary
God. And see,
in order for them
that
to
makes me
retrieve
angry
Pasek's
because
body. A local
they're just
news outlet
being
reported that
lions.
the
Why do
lioness
you have to
was
shoot them?
pregnant at the time.
Just because they killed a
Number
human?
6. Dean Armstrong. In August of 2012, a man from Cambridge, England, nearly died after he was stung by his pet scorpion. Dean Armstrong had grown up surrounded by exotic
These
animals,
people are idiots.
as his father had owned a zoo in the 1960s. Since his late teens, Armstrong had started his own collection of reptiles and arachnids. He was in his early 40s when he got Sue the scorpion from a local pet shop. The owners had trouble selling her because she only had one pincer, which meant that she struggled to hold food. Armstrong was trying to feed her a cricket when Sue whipped her tail over. The man had been stung or bitten by his pets numerous times, but remembered at that moment feeling fear for the first time. Within a minute of being stung, Armstrong collapsed. Fortunately, he was almost immediately discovered by his cleaner, who called the emergency services. He was rushed to Woods Cross Hospital in East London, where he received a blood transfusion meant to flush the venom out of his system. When he woke up, he was paralyzed on the right side of his body and he couldn't speak. Armstrong was relieved about an hour later
that is scary.
when the effect had passed, not knowing that it was only the beginning of his ordeal. The venom had severely damaged his pancreas, and weeks later, he was in surgery to have the organ drained of the toxins.
Oh my
Another year
goodness.
passed before he suffered further complications from the initial sting, when a cyst broke in his stomach and he started vomiting blood. Armstrong underwent life-saving surgery. When he came to, doctors told him that they'd removed his stomach, gallbladder, half his pancreas, and some intestines. Even though he'd have to carry a colostomy bag around for the rest of his life, Armstrong felt fortunate to have survived. Number 5.
I mean, you survived,
Sharon
but that's
Miller.
a lot to deal with. From
In
one
the late
bite?
1990s, Sharon Miller purchased a tarantula that her 8-year-old daughter had wanted from a Lake Forest pet shop in California. Miller knew that it could bite, but that the venom, barring a severe allergic reaction, generally had very low toxicity towards humans. However, she was completely unaware of a second and arguably more effective defensive response. The woman reached into the spider's cage to clean it, but suddenly felt discomfort in her eyes. As she rubbed them, they became red and extremely painful. She compared the sensation to having burning grains of sand in her eyes. What the pet store had reportedly failed to tell her was that when faced with larger attackers, tarantulas will flick their hind legs forward and fling hairs from their abdomen into the air. The arachnids can be quite precise in directing their attack. The hairs aren't soft, but more like minuscule barbs that are meant to affect their target's sight. Miller was left with blurred vision after several of the tarantula's hairs got lodged in her right eye. She subsequently sued the pet shop for medical expenses and emotional distress,
why didn't you tell me that
they
part?
failed to warn her about the dangers of owning the exotic pet. Number 4. Norman Buwalda.
That's crazy.
In 2010, Norman Buwalda, chairman of the Canadian Exotic Animal Owners Association, was fatally mauled by a massive tiger he'd kept at his property in Southwold, Ontario. Nobody witnessed the attack, which claimed 66-year-old Buwalda's life. A family member who'd found his mangled remains was able to lock the 650-pound Siberian male in a separate portion of the cage. When officers arrived at the scene, it was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth in its enclosure. It hadn't been the first attack to occur on Buwalda's property. A few years prior, in 2004, a person from Toronto suffered severe head and neck injuries after being mauled by one of his tigers. They survived and recovered with treatment. Southwold's deputy mayor told a media outlet that the township had lost the case that would have forced Buwalda to get rid of his exotic pets. In a dark, ironic twist, one of the animals that he'd fought so hard to keep ultimately ended his life. The fate of the tiger remains unclear. Number 3.
Did they kill him?
Daniel Brandon.
For being a tiger?
On August the 25th of 2017, Englishman Daniel Brandon was killed by his pet African rock python at his family's home near Basingstoke in North Hampshire. The 31-year-old had owned the 8-foot serpent, named Tiny, since she was small enough to fit in his hand. In the wild, an African rock python will use its formidable strength to constrict antelopes, monkeys, and even small crocodiles. which it then devours whole.
Oh my God.
Brandon kept several other snakes and was never scared of Tiny, according to his mother. However, she reported that the snake would sometimes lash out at her when she entered the room. On the night of Brandon's
I would not
death,
be
the woman
entering that
remembered a
room
thud
ever.
coming from his room, but thought that he'd knocked something over or dropped a piece of fitness equipment. She later found him unresponsive and Tiny coiled under a cabinet. A coroner ruled without doubt that Brandon had died from asphyxiation following contact with the python. Today's topic was requested by Fawn and In Case of Rain. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Sochiro Mori. In 2018, a Japanese man was mauled to death by the Asian black bear he'd been hired to care for. 56-year-old Sochiro Mori had gone to the residence located northeast of Tokyo. It was there that the bear's owner, an unnamed 70-year-old man, was keeping it in an enclosure. Based on the reports of local authorities, he had the necessary permits for the bear, which stood at 4 foot 2 inches and weighed an estimated 110 pounds. Mori, who was the animal's caretaker, had entered the cage, but before long, a neighbor heard him screaming. The neighbor went to the house and found Mori severely mauled in the animal's enclosure. He was taken to the hospital, where he was later pronounced dead.
I'm sure.
Number 1. Paul and Mandy McDonald. In 2019, an Australian couple was brutally attacked by a deer that kept at their farm in Moynihan, northeast Victoria. 47-year-old Paul McDonald was feeding the wapiti, a cross between a red deer and an elk, when it unexpectedly lunged at him. His wife, 45-year-old Mandy, intervened, but sustained devastating injuries to her leg and upper body. Their teenage son witnessed the incident and ran to get help. Police officers arrived at the scene and fatally shot the deer. Mandy survived, but Paul had been gored to death. The woman was flown to the Alfred Hospital in critical condition, and according to updates on her case, she required over a dozen surgeries on a long road to recovery. In the aftermath of the attack, wildlife authorities warned that male deer, even though they may seem docile the rest of the year, become aggressive come mating season.
Wow,
thanks for watching.
I didn't know that. That's absolutely crazy. I mean, pretty much all of these deaths were just preventable. I mean, people keeping these dangerous animals as pets. You know, I know people keep like monkeys and apes and gorillas, and I mean, it's not worth it. Even if you raise the animal, it still has its own nature. It has its own mind. It has its own instincts. And it doesn't matter if you raise the animal, it's still gonna be what it is. I mean, you can raise an alligator. If it wants to, it'll still attack you because it sees food, it sees meat, it sees something moving, something, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter how long you've had it. You can't trust an animal to just not attack you because it knows who you are or you raised it. I mean, especially not like a snake. You can get a snake from the time it was born and it will still snap and bite you and kill you, or nearly kill you. I don't know what these people are thinking. Like, just wild. And then I just don't agree, like, when people kill animals because they attacked and killed a human. Why should the animal die for being what it is? Just like with Harambe, first of all, he didn't even harm the child, and then he tried to save it, and then you kill the animal for coming in contact with the child. It's curious. It doesn't know what's happening. Oh my God, I just hate hearing stories like that when people kill the animal that attacked the human. It's like, you shouldn't have been around it. You shouldn't have had it as a pet. You shouldn't have been touching it. You shouldn't have gotten that close. You shouldn't have been hopping the gate, coming into the park illegally through wherever. Like that stuff just makes me mad because it's like, how are you going to kill an animal for being what it is? That's like killing a human for speaking, or like for walking on 2 feet. Like that's what it does. I mean, come on. Anyway, like I said, most of these deaths were just preventable. Stupid. I mean, anyway, guys, let me know what you thought about this video down in the comments below. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, be blessed, be your best, and keep down the stress, and stick to dogs and cats. Bye, guys.